Again, good morning and thank you for joining us today. This is intended to be a quick overview as we prepare for the administration of the Access 2.0 for the 2016-17 school year. Thank you so much for joining. And again, I'm Melanie Jones, the Assessment Coordinator for Access and the WIDA Suite of Assessments, and I'm joined here today with Alyssa Metzler. Hi, everyone. And we are going to jump in, and we'll have plenty of time to answer your questions both along the way as pertinent and then at the end as well.
And just so you know, for those of you who joined just a few minutes ago, this is Alyssa, and I will be manning the question and answers, so please do feel free to put your questions in, and we will get those answered as we go through. As well as we are recording this, and I will be archiving it to the Title III and EL YouTube page, so if you're someone in your district needs to look at this information at a later date, it will be archived there. Hopefully, if not today, by tomorrow at the latest. So I will hand over to Melanie and enjoy.
So our goal and the topics for today as we progress through today's presentation, we're going to just briefly review WIDA Suite of Assessments. I know this is our year 2 going in, so some of this will be just a tinge of review, but designed to refresh ongoing district test coordinators and administrators, as well as folks who might be brand new to this assessment and their role. We'll look at the Access 2.0 and data coding related to your November upload, and that should say IC upload, as this is the basis of the test orders and creates our pre-identification file that we'll be sending to our vendors. We'll look at the accommodations request form that we sent from my department. The due date is November 14th. I apologize, that's not written in there. It's listed later in the presentation. We'll look at the additional materials ordering protocol for this year. That includes students that might be coming in new, the alternate test, and then also any additional paper materials that you may need and why you may need those. We're going to look at just some things to consider as you plan ahead for this test, and then Idaho-specific guidance and resources. We'll have time for questions and answers as well. So just a brief overview, again, won't spend a lot of time on this since this is year 2 of the administration of the WIDA Access 2.0, but as a brief reminder, the home language survey triggers if there's another, if there's an answer that indicates there's another language other than English spoken in a home, and or the responses to your survey meet your rubric in your school or district, then it's sort of your signal to screen the student and administer the WAPT. So on the left side, again, the WAPT screener is our English language learner identification tool, and Idaho will continue to use the WAPT for the 2016-17 year. I mention that because you might see on your portal other references to the WIDA screener. That is their new screener, but we will be using the WAPT for the rest of this year. So this is administered within 30 days of the start of the school year or following the first 30 days within 2 weeks of a student's start date. From there, if a student is found eligible for services and is coded as an L, then the WIDA Access 2.0 is administered, and that is your summative L test administered annually during the test window established per state. So Idaho is obviously part of a WIDA consortium state. We all know that probably by now, but we do have our own individual test window that you can see off of our WIDA website, and I'll show you the calendar here in just a moment. So if you're needing a refresh, again, this is more of a listed side of things, procedural guidance regarding the process from, the whole spectrum from identification to services. Please refer to your annual ELP manual, which is linked here. Preparation for Access 2.0. WIDA has suggested that districts and schools begin 10 weeks, if not a little more, in advance. And when you consider the breaks that are coming up with holidays, that is roughly now. It kind of caught me off guard when I was making this presentation because it has arrived to begin the detailed preparations and certifications required for the administration of this test. I especially encourage that if you are a charter or a virtual charter school that might need some extra assistance in identifying a location for any of your L students and or if you need to assess your technology if you're administering this test off-site. This is a copy and paste. I realize the font is a little small. I apologize. It is off of the WIDA website, but it is essentially a breakdown of our activities as we prepare for the test window, which is highlighted in red. That is January 30th through March 10th this year. So we have bumped back a little bit, and the assessment is a little earlier than it was last year. And the idea is that we will be getting some data validation done a little earlier, and then therefore dates available, the scores will be available to you all a little bit earlier as well, which is a win-win for everybody. November IC upload. That is happening soon. So the deadline for the final upload, there's a window, but the deadline is November 18th. What do you need to report? These are all required fields listed, and then not required but recommended there if you have the data to upload. That would be helpful for us. Now, we wanted to make sure the box to the left, here's sort of my messaging as well. Please make sure that all of your L student statuses are updated to reflect their current status for the school year. So if a student has Access 2.0 scores from last year, we want to ensure that the coding updates are done, they've been made for this year if necessary. Meaning if a student has exited, ensure that reflects in their IC upload, especially for November. If you have new students who have just entered, of course you'd want to make sure that they're captured in this upload as possible as well. The more students we could capture, the better. I'm going to highlight briefly here why, also because the state will be issuing the pre-ID file to our vendor, and this is all based upon your November IC upload. So we've captured October, and now we're moving into November. Coding of ELF in Access 2.0. Again, ensuring that you are testing the correct student. Last year was year one of administering Access, and there were students who tested that shouldn't have tested, and then there were students who should have tested that were not tested. So we are trying with more accuracy to assist you all in understanding the connection of coding this population as related to test administration. So if your ELFs are coded as an L1, an EW, or an LE, they should take the Access 2.0. That's our trigger. They should be assessed with this test. If we have exited students, so if we see a student coded and you see a student coded as X1 or X2, that signifies obviously exited status, and then therefore would not be assessed with Access 2.0 as part of their monitoring status. In addition, if students are assessed, the schools and districts will be invoiced for the test accordingly. And again, this is not meaning to be punitive, but it is the reality that we have as far as utilization of federal funds for active English language learners in this test. So if you have any questions on that, feel free to let us know, but we just wanted to remind you that the coding is very much so attached to who should be assessed annually versus not as far as your monitoring group. Just wanted to capture here some changes from last year's process, which was year one. I wanted to just emphasize the year one part because I think things are going to go a lot smoother this year. There's been a lot of behind-the-scenes upgrades and changes on Rita and DRC's part, but also we hope to provide you all with a lot of resources that are pertinent to the timing of the test. So the SDE this year will submit the order for the pre-ID file. Again, we are using the IC upload for this purpose, and our vendor will receive that quite soon. In I think the beginning of December is the deadline. We sent the Google form, I did, specifically Melanie did, to request accommodation orders, and that will be a supplement to our pre-ID file. If you did not receive this request, please feel free to email me and let me know. Our deadline for receiving those requests for accommodation orders are Monday, November 14th. I've had the question of why, maybe why that's a separate item this year, and it's mainly because we are handling the pre-ID side of things, and the IC upload doesn't capture always the full accommodation request that you might know around a certain student that you need to administer this test. So again, LEAs, you all will have a chance to view your test orders once the test setup window begins. You can order during the additional materials ordering window for new students, and our hope is that either DRC will let us know when this occurs, and/or we might have a small request that a form that you just shoot our way when this is done. And this is related to accountability and tracking of who is taking this test. It's not to add to your plate, but we'll make it brief and easy for you if that needs to happen this year. Again, I'm very excited to hear about the technology improvements that Rita and DRC have implemented. Can't emphasize enough the importance to check on these tech requirements to administer this test. As you all know, if you were involved last year, it's a dynamic test. It has a lot of components, a lot of domains. And things have changed this year, so we want to ensure that you are fully aware of what is required as far as bandwidth and demands you might have on your school during other time periods of the year. If a group's in a library and you're having a small group test with access, we want to make sure that you know what might occur. The SDE will complete the data validation this year, and as a result, the scores will arrive a little earlier. We thought that was a nice win-win there, so we're excited to see that. The date will come a little earlier. You'll know the results earlier in May. There's much more training available this year per each phase of testing, and this is, again, an improvement as far as communication from Rita resources. So you'll see a lot of terminology around pre-testing, during testing, and then post-testing. Processes briefly that will remain the same. Again, we just need that accurate IT data report. I don't want to sound like a broken record here, but I probably am. So again, that is just an important critical connection as far as your coding and who will take the test. We will just be visually comparing last year's L count to this year's. So you might get an email or a call just if there's a huge discrepancy or drastic changes, just so we can understand what might have occurred in your school or district. All trainings and modules, all the resources are found, as you know, off of the Rita main page. So if you're a district test coordinator and you're heading up the training and the monitoring of training of your staff, you'll want to make sure that they know to go to the Rita website for this. Logistics as far as managing users, changing tiers, reports, and ordering, that's found off of the AMS link, which is off of the main Rita site. So that's our vendor DRC. All users administering any of the Rita suite of assessments must be certified annually, and the exceptions would include if you've already certified in kindergarten or the alt test. You don't have to recertify for that, but we do recommend refreshing because there have been some small changes that you want to pick up on. Also, remaining the same, this is a question we've been receiving related to the Google form that we sent, but grades 1 through 3, the writing domain is administered via paper. That's built in, it's inherent into the test. It's embedded into Rita's processes, therefore it's not considered an accommodation request. So Rita will send those materials to you according to the grade of your student. If they're grades 1 through 3, you will receive that as part of your order. So any other paper request outside of this embedded part of the test would then be considered an accommodation. We have a question, yes.
So I had a couple questions come through. This is Alyssa. I've had a couple questions come through regarding EL coding. So I'm going to pop back 2 slides, if you don't mind, and answer these 3 questions. They actually kind of all 3 go together. Asking about what these codes and what do they mean and how to code students. So just so you know, an L1 status student is a student who is new to the country and is in their first year in a U.S. school. So that is where your L1 status comes from. Once a student has been enrolled in a U.S. school for 1 year, then you would code them as LE. And most of your students in your district will fall under this category, your LE. These are your currently enrolled EL status students, okay? The only other additional code that you might have for students who will be taking the assessment would be your EW code. EW is for a student whose parent has waived their EL services. And it's very important that you know that just because a parent waives the student's services from an EL program, that does not exempt them from the Title III requirement to be assessed for English language proficiency. So the parent can waive the services by filling out a form. The form would need to be filed in the student's cumulative file every school year. And then that student is coded as EW, which means they are an EL student who has waived services, hence the W. And this student would be then not receiving EL services, but the Title III requirement is that they are federally required to take an EL assessment. So that student would still take Access 2.0 and is required to take Access 2.0. And they could meet the EL, or excuse me, the exit criteria and be exited, or they would remain an EW student through this school year, and then if the parent chooses to waive services the following year, then they have to fill out the form again. They would be coded as EW, but would still have to take the assessment. So those are your three codes, the definition of those. And I have another one. Do EW students need to be coded in PowerSchool as LE or just EW? So you would have to, if an EW student or if a student's parents have waived services, that student would be coded as an EW student. And just one other follow-up question. Kindergarten would be coded as an L1 student. Yes, if this is their first year in a U.S. school, which a lot of your kindergartners will be, yes, they would fall under as an L1 student. So,
great question. Thank you, Alyssa. Yeah. Is that it?
That is it for my questions. And please let me know. There's a couple questions that came through. If I didn't clarify well enough to answer those questions, please just double check with me, and I will let Melanie continue on.
Okay. So what role would you play as far as your title and the WIDA Access test? As a test coordinator, again, you will be participating as desired in WIDA webinars, administering paper online modules. You'll have access to the AMS site to create your test administrator / proctor profiles, and you can view these administrators' certifications, where they are in the process, whether they don't have any completed, whether they've started and have a couple left, or they're fully completed. We highly, highly encourage that process to start now. The messaging as far as, hey, this takes a little bit, I think that caught some of our administrators and test coordinators off guard last year. So definitely want to leave yourself enough time and your staff enough time to complete the certification. And it would be great if test coordinators can relay that messaging to staff that will be administering these assessments, and specifically Access. So again, you can get into the user interface side as a test coordinator in the AMS, delete, adding, ordering tests only during that additional window, and there'll be a little bit of a follow-up around that this year, potentially, as far as the SDE being notified if you do that. And then creating testing rosters and sessions. There's a chance to do that after that initial order has been put forth. Your test administrator and proctor access, again, you'll have access to that AMS, WIDA AMS side of things to print test tickets, creating sessions. You must, again, be certified to give the assessments being given according to the grade and level that you're administering them. Technology coordinators. This role is super important. This is the person right now that likely would be the most active in the test setup phase. You want to access your site readiness. Assess, I think I wrote access, meaning assess your site access readiness utilizing the WIDA Tech Guideline Checklist, which I'll show you here in just a moment. That has been enhanced, and it's a very user-friendly guide this year. I recommend printing it. If you are wearing many hats, again, ensuring that your site is technology ready for this test will be a really nice reassurance as you move through closer to the end of the year. Apologize for any background noise you might hear. Might be a little construction here. So again, we've mentioned that everyone administering the WIDA suite of assessments needs to be certified. This is, again, just a visual of how to do that. As a district test coordinator, you do have permission to monitor training status per user. We can also see that, so if you have any questions about how to get there, let us know. We encourage that certification and test trainings happen now. This is the time of year you want to make sure that's going on. On each WIDA page, there's a key resource block. I just copy and pasted here, but I wanted to point out that all of the manuals and resources have been refreshed for this school year. They reflect the changes, and again, that sort of per testing phase organization that WIDA has moved towards. There is a new TAM, Test Administrator Manual. There is a Test Coordinator Manual. There are supplements on accessibilities and accommodations, which I have personally found very useful because that is a big conversation sometimes and considerations regarding your decisions on accommodations for this test. There is a technology user guide as well at the bottom there, and that's the one, again, where you'd want to print and assess your site technology readiness. So let us know if you have trouble finding any of these resources. Just wanted to let you know where they are on each WIDA's page. We have a question, too.
So I do have a question that came up. Is it okay for a test coordinator to also be a test administrator or proctor?
It is, and that happens sometimes. That's a great question. We want to just make sure that your permissions are set where they need to be set in the WIDA AMS. So if you have any issues, definitely let me know.
And then one other question, how do you access the AMS? And I believe you're going to, that's the question, I believe she's going to describe how to do that. So I wanted to ask that because it was a very good segue into kind of the next slides here. So,
right.
So I think that she's going to share that.
Yeah. So you will need a username and password. So how do you get to the training modules? Here's the visual of that. And it's hard in a webinar sometimes to go live online. So we do a little bit of cut and paste here to kind of stay on topic. If so you have a hard time finding anything, let me know after this webinar training. So the WIDA AMS and WIDA US site are linked in one. So if you go to WIDA.us and sign in, under your My Account and Secure portal, you will need a username and password, which your district test coordinator can set up for you. If you have issues with that, the SDE, Melanie, myself, would be your backup for that. So once you're logged in, you will see here your account and portal is set up for the trainings themselves. So you'll see all the training courses available here. You dive in and click these modules, and they're pretty intuitive as far as what you might need to do with them. There's tabs that will say begin training, and it is organized per test and per grade, and then also mode. So you'll see paper and online. I, to the left, put our Idaho consortium page on here, so we're a member state. If you were to hover over consortium, member would show up, and you can click Idaho. There's a lot of specific guidance for our state specifically, including this checklist, which I've been told will be updated likely within the next couple of days. We've been waiting anxiously for this to go online. It would be a great thing to print out because it gives you a step-by-step guide as to what you need to do to be ready here. So again, what we heard from the field last year was we just need a checklist. This is a lot to navigate. And we have created that with the assistance of Rita. So I would encourage you to check this off, go through this again as a step-by-step guide for the pre-testing phase at this point since we're preparing for administration. Now, within the WIDA US site that I just showed a clip of in the former slide, there is a DRC WIDA AMS link as well. So it's an all-in-one, one-stop shop, but this will open up a new browser because it is DRC's interface. AMS stands for our Assessment Management System, and the vendor for that is Data Recognition Corporation. This should be your only statewide assessment remaining on the DRC platform. So for test coordinators, that might be handy to know. Our science went over to our Smarter Balance platform. So this is, WIDA will be the only one. I know there was a little bit of conflict last year with that because you had to to deinstall or uninstall something to prepare for WIDA. So you shouldn't have that complication this year. So again, DRC made some updates to their navigation, to their look. The menu options remain the same. Again, you'll just want to log in, make sure that you're comfortable with finding what you need, especially as a district test coordinator. If you're managing trainings or test sessions, and the administrator might also need to be familiar with this interface. Technology requirements for the online test are off of our Access for ELS page. Again, everything kind of hovers in that right-hand corner when you access WIDA US pages and assessment links. I would highly recommend looking over this at this stage. Again, if you're a charter, virtual charter, it is probably going to be an invaluable resource as you find locations for your students. Headphones are necessary for all domains. Headsets and headphones with built-in microphones are an additional requirement for the speaking test. This is carryover tips from last year, thanks to Alyssa capturing a lot of this. So we just wanted to remind you that all these components would be present this year. Technology requirements, again, still compatible with Smarter Balance, but we wanted to bring up the fact that DRC still requires that cached communication, and there'll be a dual dynamic in place. Technology terminology is not my strong point. So again, utilizing this tech requirement checklist would be really useful in preparing your site. So let us know if you have any questions, again, locating these resources online. I'm just going to bring up all of this here. What test should you give? Again, most of your students should be taking the online version. Idaho is an online test state. Some exceptions could include the kinder tests are all paper-based. Of course, that's a separate dynamic there. And requires that separate certification accordingly. All alternate access tests are also paper-based. And if a student needs large print copy, again, that would be a paper request coming in. If you know that you have a newcomer who has no computer skills or awareness, that would be an example of paper being an accommodation. And that might be something to assess right now and utilize that Google form that I sent to request that as an accommodation for a student who might be brand new. The test is not a la carte. I thought that was a great way to capture this. You cannot administer some portions of the test online and some portions paper-based. The only, again, exclusion to that rule would be grades 1 through 3 with a writing domain, because it is built in inherent to the test. Those students developmentally are less apt to have skills on the keyboard, so Rita will send their writing booklets as part of the test order for grades 1 through 3. Again, just a reminder, it's good at this stage to assess your identified English language learner population and your needed test materials. Your Google form was sent specifically to district test coordinators and anyone who had the coding in IDCI, which is our upload with the state, as the Idaho English Language Proficiency contact for your district. So in many cases it was sent to both of you. We just request that you coordinate and request your order accommodations per student so we can get everything as accurate as we can over to the vendor after the November IC upload. We have a question. Sure.
I had a question come through, and I thought it might be a good time to have it answered. The question is, what's the best way to change user role information? If you have an administrator who's changed the school or something like that, what's the best way for a test coordinator to go about doing changing roles or permissions?
That's a great question. It's the time of year that needs to occur. And you could get into, if you're a district test coordinator, the WIDA AMS, I have the worst time saying that, site should allow you to adjust and delete a user, a test administrator, and then increase permissions or add a user as well. So again, that would just be getting into the WIDA AMS. Let me find that screen. I think it might help to have a visual. shouldn't be here. As you log in as a district test coordinator, you should be able to get into the WIDA US site would be here, account creator. And then the DRC AMS site would help you manage users. Right here, this tab would be where you would want to go as a district test coordinator for all those activities mentioned.
So the follow-up to that is if they have an administrator who administered the assessment last year and is no longer administering this year, do they inactivate that person, or are they able to delete that person?
I would say if your administrator is no longer employed, certainly deleting the profile would be advised. However, if the person will be involved maybe in the future or overseeing the test in any capacity, it might be appropriate to leave them. So we'd have to leave that up to your professional judgment as far as the person's role in your school or district. I'm happy to also help and serve as a backup if you feel like someone may or may not be on that needs certain permission. So feel free to contact me as well. The WIDA US folks are also available, and there's also a number you can call if you have issues with access. They will let you know what our state protocol is as far as who to contact with a management system question.
And then just quickly, one other question regarding the last thing that you would comment about writing online for grades
1 through 3.
Yeah. So I'm going to let you get there for a second so you can. The question is regarding second and third graders being able to keyboard. And this is Alyssa, and I can go ahead and answer this, but it is the assumption that all first through third graders will take a writing, a paper pencil writing prompt. That actually grades 1 through 3, excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm getting tongue-tied here. That grades 1 through 3, the assumption is that they will take writing, paper pencil, and that keyboarding is not an option for grades 1 through 3. We do default to keyboarding writing for grades 4 through 12, though. The assumption is that they will take writing online, but grades 1 through 3, there shouldn't be an option of keyboarding for grades 1 through 3.
And that is an acknowledgement. Again, last year there was a little bit of confusion with test material sent for grades 4 and 5. That should not occur this year. So, great question. So, notes on accommodations. This is a federally required assessment based upon L status and title funds being administered for services for students. So I recently had a relatively complicated accommodation question come my way and consulted with SDE staff and our director and thought this was a great quote, and then realized that Rita also endorsed the quote. So I wanted to put it in here as far as our framework for thinking about accommodations. It's not so much a matter of if a student will take this test in particular, but how the student will take the test. So that really helped me reframe, like, okay, moving forward, how do we best support a student despite disability, et cetera? There's a lot of universal tool language and universal design concepts embedded into Access and WIDA suite of assessment. It is really a great time now to familiarize yourself with recommendations and guidelines and communications with your special education directors, anyone who might be a part of making decisions and or part of a team making decisions for students related to accommodations. Wanted to point out what this looks like. Again, logging in, once you're in the WIDA US site, there is under assessment a separate accountability and accommodation section. Lots of guidance here. It does take a few minutes to read. I will give you that as a heads up. So allotting time now would be important to do that. Who qualifies for the alternate access test? So this is related to that. Alternate access for ELS participation. This is a great visual decision tree you can move through and keep handy. Essentially, if a student is not also taking the state test, alt test, then this student should not then take the alternate access test. I hope I captured that right. If the student is taking the alt ISAT test, then they're also eligible for the alt access test. If they are not taking the state test under the alt format, then they would not be eligible to take access under that as well. But move through your decision tree here, and that should help teams, IEP teams in particular, determine whether this would be an appropriate order or not. I'm sorry, just a second, we have a question coming through here.
The question came up of what if you have a student who is not taking the alt ISAT if they're grade 1 through, or kindergarten through 2nd grade?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that one. Now, I think there's some context, some background information I might need to process. So if maybe you can email me that specific question, I'm happy to kind of look through that and answer. It sounds like an important question to address. So might have a couple other questions for you in regards to that to be able to answer it. So timing. This, I think, is just important, again, as part of your tech readiness, looking at timing of this test as a coordinator. There's a lot that you're coordinating often in districts, whether big or small. So can you break up the test? And that's one of our most FAQs, I think, coming in. A lot of calls I got last year around that as well. So the answer is yes, and that we suggest that you do. So the more familiar you get with Access and the domain within Access, I think you'll have more confidence about how to structure this test. So you may break it up into 4 chunks by domain. So as a reminder, it's organized in 4 domains: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. You cannot break up within those domain segments. So you can't split listening in half, for instance, or reading in half. But the domains themselves can be divided up. So all of the domain must be done in one sitting, completed in one sitting ideally. Exceptions to this might be when there's an IEP accommodation in play. When possible, we're happy to connect you to a nearby school, and this comment is directed to virtual schools who are working with ELS on this test and coordinating it. So let us know if we can help connect you to a school where test logistics might already be set up. We're happy to assist in giving you some contact information. We know coordinating this in a hotel, for instance, would be challenging, potentially challenging. So let us know if we can assist with that. This has happened, so wanted to throw it in here, and again, a great consideration that Alyssa may have experienced in her time in the classroom. So what if there's a fire drill, something anticipated? Some of the logistics, as a reminder, you can pause this assessment for 30 minutes and then go back to resume the test. Unlike the ISAT, the Smarter Balance test, there's not a time limit that the assessment must be completed in. Some states do have that as a standard and a state convention that must be followed, but Idaho does not. The test coordinator and proctors should be mindful of the happenings in your school so you can avoid any unneeded interruptions. So please, consider what you might need to consider as far as your school, your teachers, your environment, and asking about ideal times to administer this test. I recall a festival happening at one point, and a student was slated to take the access test and was quite devastated because they were going to be removed from something that felt really important as far as classroom cohesion and bonding with the class. So field trips, things like that, programs going on, please be mindful of that because of also the length requirements of Access 2.0. Okay, I'm going to toss it back over to Alyssa for some other considerations. Okay, and I'm going to go through these next couple slides, kind of buzz through them a little quickly so that I can hand it back over to Melanie here and we can open it up for questions at the end. But I'm going to quickly go through just some considerations. If you are the person who is either administering or setting up the schedule for the administration, just some considerations to keep in mind. That since students are doing the speaking and it is voice capturing on the computer, they will think they sound funny. So just really a high recommendation
to let kids start practicing speaking and voice capturing into a computer now, so that you get the giggles out, because they will think they sound funny. So you may, in the next couple months, consider doing some of your EL assignments that students are speaking into the computer, and that is their assignment, is their voice capturing and practicing that, and knowing what they sound like. Just another thing, be mindful of the tests that you're choosing. Just the reasoning for, consider the additional certifications that you might need to have. If you're only giving the kindergarten assessment, you only need to take the kindergarten certification. So don't sign yourself up for more work if that's not an assessment that you're giving. Let's see, the online assessment is adaptive, and so based on how a student answered questions, the assessment will adapt to them and their level of language proficiency, but the paper is not. So if you are a district who chooses to contact Melanie and to only administer the paper assessment, you are going to need to be familiar with tier protocol in that situation, so you know what assessment needs to be ordered for that student, because you are going to have to be the adaptive component, because they're not taking it online that will allow the computer to adapt for them. So just be mindful of the assessments you are administering. The assumption is that all students who are L1, EW, and LE will all be taking online assessments unless you contact the SDE and let us know otherwise. Do sample. There are samples, and we will go through the sample thing, options and how to access the sample questions with the proctor, or excuse me, with our trainer next week. So those of you who are attending those forums next week, so you will have the opportunity to see what they look like, see what they sound like, how to access them, so that you can have students practice using them and knowing what the questions look like and sound like. Weird. Okay, so some additional considerations. Be mindful that your headphones, pay attention to what component, headphone component your computer has. I know some headphones require a USB jack. Some headphones require a jack for the speaker and the headphone separately, but then the computer expects only one import. So just really make sure that the headphones and speakers, or excuse me, headphones and microphones that you are using are compatible with the computers that you're using. So I was told last year that one district was doing some ordering of these materials, and there was a certain vendor, and I don't know who, but there were certain vendors who, if you had a bulk order, they were giving some price deals on that. So group administration, the assessment can be administered as in a group. Listening, reading, and writing are easily group administered. Speaking, you might want to make sure you are doing it in smaller groups, just simply because you don't want the student who is voice capturing their voice to pick up the person who is speaking next to them. So Rita did last year put a recommendation of having students separated by about 4-ish feet from one another, so they don't pick up as much background noise. Allow time for cleanup when you are scheduling. February is flu season, and you will have students sick. I remember when I was administering the assessment and I would have scheduled, I would always at least have one day at the end of the week that was just for cleanup, or would have an entire week at the end that was just specifically for cleanup. You will have students who are sick, so please do make sure that you account for that as you are creating those schedules. Keep documentation of certifications for monitoring. You will notice that when you sign into the WIDA Secure site that there is an availability for you to click on a tile to show your certifications. The reasoning for that, and if you choose, you can print out a hard copy. The reasoning you might want to do that is in the event that you are a district being monitored, the monitoring team will come in and ensure that the individuals who are giving the assessment are certified to be giving the componency assessment that they are certified to give. So that might be the only time that you might want to ensure that you have them as a hard copy. It's really up to you. They will be housed also on that secure site as well. keeping school staff in the loop, making sure your teachers know that you are going to be coming and pulling a student out of the classroom. I know it was, I felt really bad as a teacher. I would let a principal know that I was coming to a district that, or excuse me, I was coming to a school that day to do the assessment, but the message hadn't trickled down to the teacher, and then I showed up in the classroom and the teacher had no idea I was going to be removing that student from the classroom for up to possibly a couple hours. So just keep staff in the loop. Make sure that the message is being trickled down to all the people who are affected by this. Involve parents. If you have the ability to let parents know that their student is being tested, the test does not require permission, but if you can let the parents know that, hey, we've got this really important assessment coming up, that students can make sure that they've got breakfast and that they're in school on time and everything like that. And additionally, have a backup plan. I did have had situations where someone was certified to give all the assessments for a district, and I have two situations. One where a person was no longer employed by the district by the time the assessment came around, and they were in the HERF bin because no one was certified to give the assessment. Have a backup plan. Another situation was where another teacher was certified to give the entire assessment and was pregnant and then had to be put on bed rest. And that district was, again, left with no one to administer the assessment. So make sure that you have a backup in the event, not that we ever wish that upon anybody, but things do happen. Scheduling, be mindful of recess, specials. One situation where a student was testing up into the last minute of the school day. By the time they finished the assessment, got to their locker, packed up their bags, they had missed the bus. So be mindful of those kinds of things. One district even was telling me that they had like a pep session before the test to get students ready for that, to kind of gear them up and know what the expectation of what was going to be happening that day. Check with schedulers about good or bad times. You know, do not schedule the assessment during an assembly or a field trip, because, and especially Valentine's Day parties, I promise you, you do not want the wrath of a first or second grader and taking them out of their Valentine's Day party. So just be mindful of those kinds of things. Additionally, for students on IEPs, you might want to consider having the special ed teacher become your certified proctor to administer the alternate assessment. It might be that that person knows the student best and might be the best person to administer that assessment to that student. So just consider that as a possibility. And the other thing is, if you can, divide and conquer. If you have a very large population of kindergarten students that need to be tested, maybe you just want to have one person focus on kindergarten and then another person focus on your grades 1 through 12. You can divide and conquer. Just make sure the person who's giving the assessment is certified to give the assessment that they're giving, okay? So that kindergarten person couldn't then the next day go and administer the grades 1 through 12, but you can divide and conquer. And with that, that is my piece. I'm going to hand it back over to Melanie. I'm looking through the questions right now, and I don't see anything that we haven't answered, but please continue to put your questions in, and I will let Melanie go ahead and finish up the last part of our presentation.
Yeah, thank you. So we thought we would include, of course, Alyssa mentioned the upcoming Rita trainings. This year we have Rita trainers coming into Idaho in both Boise and Idaho Falls. We didn't mean or intend this to be a duplicate of what they plan to do. It will go way deeper into access and administration dynamics of the test. So we are looking forward to having them here and learning from their expertise, and that is coming up. But if you could not make that or could not attend either of those, or some of the webinars have already passed, we're glad that you tuned in today. And just wanted to share ways to stay in touch with us and on top of assessment news and updates. So one of the things that the assessment department releases every 2 weeks is a newsletter for all of our assessments. So if you're just heading up WIDA, if that is the case, I don't know how often that happens, but you can just subscribe and or look at our newsletter online and just toggle right down to the WIDA access update. So we put in critical deadlines, calendar information, upcoming trainings, etc. Alyssa is great at also cross-referencing, and as she mentioned, this will be put on the English Language Learner Department YouTube page, so there's a lot of resources as well that are linked from their department page. Rita has really upped their webinars this year, and again, as I mentioned, a lot of the phrasing is set per phase of the test. So we're looking at pre-testing, during testing, and post-testing webinars. They are listed under the WIDA US website. You can find them by clicking the Assessment tab and then Access 2.0, Preparation and Training tab, and then the webinar box is on the right side. So I've attempted to put those directions there. I know they're kind of vague as to what that means, but this is how you would find the full schedule that they're offering through June. Again, some you might find more pertinent than others, but we would encourage you to look at past recordings if there's something pertinent going on that you're looking for, and or tune into a live webinar coming up.
I just want to respond really quick to a question. I know that there were some questions regarding that on-site training next week, and if we would be allowed to record it for those people not able to attend. We did reach out to WIDA, and they will not allow us to record that. So we do have a couple spots even still open. The registration has closed, but if you are someone who is not registered but needs to attend, please reach out to Melanie or I, and we may be able to get something arranged. But just so you know, WIDA will not allow us to do that recording, so I apologize for that.
So this year, again, much more personalization going on as far as what can I have in my hands? I need a checklist. This is a lot to consider. This would be your go-to document. So for Idaho, we have a state-specific checklist. It is off of the WIDA US website. I did put instructions here at the bottom. I felt like it was important to list this out. It can be a little varied. So it's under the consortium link. We are members. You click members, then Idaho, and then there's a box that says Access for L 2.0 checklist. It is set up per role, so your district test coordinator or a school test coordinator. They use different terminology sometimes in certain states, so that might be your test proctor, your test administrator here in Idaho, and then again the TA. So per role, what you should be doing, whether it's complete, this can be a really neat guiding document, as I said, per phase of the test. So right now I just put a capture in here before the test for online, and then we also have before the test for paper. So that should be loaded onto the site, I have been told, any day now. They just needed to clear up a couple of links that we had on our particular guidance. So what I also like about it is the live links that will take you exactly to what you need to be looking at per task. So definitely use this. Let us know how it's going, if it serves as a good guide. We would certainly love to hear any feedback. And that concludes the details here. So again, we have a couple minutes, I think 5, we're down to 5 minutes. Your questions, your needs, your concerns, how we can assist you. If you have assessment-specific questions, again, wanted to put my contact information for Melanie Jones. And then Alyssa is, of course, an expert both in the field and related to departmental services and in the classroom. So feel free to reach out to either of us with questions. But we'll take a few now with our remaining moments here.
So I had a question come through that was asked about the statement that a couple slides before. I can read the statement. It says, to take advantage of the Idaho rule when it comes to administering the alternate assessment. And I apologize, I didn't clarify that. In the rule is in Idaho that you can have anyone who gets the certification to administer the assessment can administer the assessment. It's not like some other states that require a certified EL teacher to give the assessment. So take advantage of that. Get multiple people in your district certified to give the assessment in the event that you need to have someone as a backup. And so that's the take advantage of this Idaho rule. And that if you want to, you can get a special ed teacher certified to give the ALT assessment, as well as have a EL teacher certified to give the assessment. And if the special ed teacher is the right person to administer that assessment, great, then they are able to administer it. But it also might be the case that you want to have the assessment administered together. I have done that before, where I administered it with the special ed teacher so that I could help her in those situations where she wasn't sure how to code that student's answer, that I was able to help her do that, but then she was able to get the student to do things that I wasn't able to get the student to do because they were more familiar with her than they were with me. So that is, I want to just clarify what I meant by that you can divide and conquer, have two people helping you do that, or have the right person administer the assessment for that student. So. And so far, I'm not seeing any new ones come in. We'll wait just another couple seconds here to see if you guys are formulating any last questions. Again, this will be recorded and posted, and we'll also put it off of the Access 2.0 assessment page as well. So you'll have a cross-reference for this if you need to refer back to it. All right. I don't see any new ones coming through. We will, again, just like Melanie said, we'll make sure this is archived and up on the website. And with that, we will go ahead and conclude. Please, we'll stay on for just a few more minutes if you have a question that's still coming through. But thank you for attending, and we will see you maybe if you're joining us next week. We'll see you next week. Thanks, everyone. Bye. Thank you.